I'm talking about the kind of recognition that hits you in the chest like a fist. When the features are familiar, the voice is the same, but something fundamental has shifted beneath the surface. That's what happened with my son, Marcus. For months, I felt it growing between us like frost on a window, distorting everything I thought I could see clearly. My name is Eleanor Castellano, and I'm 67 years old. I raised Marcus alone after his father collapsed from a heart attack when the boy was only 7. I worked 2 jobs, mornings shelving books at the public library, evenings scrubbing offices in Midtown, and poured every dollar into my son's future. I watched him graduate summa cum laude, helped him launch his financial consulting firm with the last of my savings. Pride doesn't begin to describe what I felt. But something changed last autumn. Marcus started calling with questions that felt wrong. Not the usual, "How are you feeling, Mom?" but pointed inquiries about my will, my power of attorney, whether I'd considered assisted living. I'm 67, not 97, I'd snap, but he'd laugh it off as responsible planning. Then came the unannounced visits, not to see me, but to inspect my rent-controlled apartment on the Upper West Side, the home where I'd raised him for 38 years. "You really should modernize this place," he said one November afternoon, running his fingers along my kitchen counter like he was appraising merchandise. "Maybe think about selling while the market's hot. This is my home, Marcus. I'm thinking about your future." His eyes, my late husband's eyes, scanned my living room with cold assessment. "What happens if something happens to you? Who's going to manage all this?" "Not you," I noticed. "This." The question landed like a stone in my stomach. That night, lying awake in the dark, I made a decision that everyone later called paranoid. I told Marcus I was visiting my cousin Deborah in Florida for 3 weeks. I sent him a fake flight itinerary, packed a suitcase, and kissed him goodbye at my door. Then I moved into a vacant studio apartment 6 blocks away and installed a hidden camera in my living room. One of those new streaming devices, nearly invisible if you don't know where to look. For 3 days, nothing happened. The camera showed only empty rooms and shifting afternoon light. I felt foolish, a ridiculous old woman spying on her successful son. Then, on the 4th night at exactly 7 o'clock, my phone erupted with 2 simultaneous notifications. One from the camera's motion sensor, one from Giuseppe, my building superintendent. "Mrs. Castellano?" His voice was hushed, urgent. "Your son just let himself in with a key. He's got 2 people with him. I thought you were in Florida." My hands trembled as I opened the camera app. The feed resolved into sharp focus. My living room, my grandmother's armchair, and Marcus standing in the center with 2 strangers. A severe woman in a gray suit and a young man clutching a tablet. They weren't visiting. They were appraising. And what I heard next would shatter everything I'd sacrificed 40 years to build. I turned up the volume on my phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. The woman's voice came through crisp and professional, utterly devoid of warmth. "The location is obviously prime real estate," she said, circling my living room with predatory efficiency. "Rent-controlled currently, but once she's no longer in residence, the landlord resets to market rate. We're talking $4,000 monthly minimum." Marcus nodded. My son, my beautiful boy who I'd rocked through nightmares and nursed through fevers, nodded like she was discussing stock portfolios, not my home. "And the liquid assets?" The young man's stylus hovered over his tablet, poised to record my worth. "Modest." Marcus's tone was clipped, businesslike. "Some savings, the life insurance policy from my father that she never touched. I made sure years ago that I'm sole beneficiary. The real value lies in liquidating the apartment and consolidating everything under proper management." The words didn't make sense at first. My brain rejected them, the way your body rejects poison before the damage sets in. Liquidating, consolidating, proper management. He was talking about me, about my life, like I was already gone, already just paperwork awaiting signature. The woman extracted documents from her leather portfolio. Even through the grainy feed, I could see my name printed across the top in bold letters. "The guardianship petition is airtight. We'll file on grounds of diminished capacity, early-stage dementia, inability to manage financial affairs." "She's not incompetent," Marcus interjected, and for one desperate second I thought he was defending me. "But she's aging, becoming forgetful. I've been documenting incidents for 6 months. Any judge will see this as preventative care, responsible planning for an elderly parent." "Preventative," the woman echoed with approval. "Forward-thinking. Very clean presentation." I watched them move through my apartment like surveyors mapping territory to conquer. The woman photographed my furniture, my books, the framed pictures on the mantel. Marcus at 7, gap-toothed and grinning. Marcus at graduation, arm around my shoulders. Marcus at his wedding to Diana, so young and hopeful. She captured it all with her phone camera, reducing my memories to inventory. Marcus led them into my bedroom, my private sanctuary, and discussed estate timelines and liquidation values, while standing beside the bed where I'd cried myself to sleep after his father died, where I'd sewn his Halloween costumes by lamplight, where I'd prayed every night that I was doing enough for him. They stayed 27 minutes. I know because I couldn't stop watching the timestamp on my phone screen, couldn't look away even as my chest constricted, and breathing became a conscious effort. When they finally left, the apartment fell silent. The camera showed my empty living room, my grandmother's chair positioned to catch afternoon sun, the home I'd defended and cherished for nearly 4 decades. I sat in the borrowed studio apartment, staring at that empty chair on my phone screen, and realized with devastating clarity. My son had been planning my erasure for months, and I'd been too blind, too trusting, too loving, to see it coming. I couldn't cry. The tears simply wouldn't come, as if grief had calcified into something harder, something that wouldn't permit the luxury of release. Instead, I sat motionless in the dark studio, replaying those 27 minutes until every word was seared into my memory. I've been documenting incidents for 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of manufactured evidence, of transforming ordinary moments into symptoms of decline. I thought back to October, when Marcus had visited and found me making tea. I'd stepped away to answer a phone call, returning to find him standing by the stove with theatrical concern. "Mom, the burner's still on. You left it unattended for almost 20 minutes. I'd laughed it off, made a joke about multitasking. Now I understood. He'd been building his case brick by brick, incident by incident. Every confused question about streaming services became cognitive decline. Every misplaced key became memory loss. My son had weaponized the ordinary way of aging into evidence of incompetence. Over the next week, I watched Marcus return 3 more times. He brought an estate appraiser who measured rooms and photographed valuables. A woman from Meadowbrook Senior Living who discussed care levels and transition protocols. Even a real estate agent who walked through with a contractor, pointing out updates that would maximize sale price. Each visit was another violation, another layer of betrayal. But I documented everything, screenshotting conversations, recording timestamps, building my own case with the same cold precision my son had used against me. On the 8th day, I had Giuseppe quietly let himself into my apartment when Marcus was gone. The superintendent, who'd known me since Marcus was in diapers, found the guardianship papers on my kitchen table and photographed every page. The petition was professionally crafted, persuasive in its concern. Marcus painted himself as a devoted son overwhelmed by his mother's deterioration. He had affidavits from paid witnesses who'd never met me, medical records I didn't remember authorizing, even bank statements showing my erratic spending. A $200 donation to the library's children's program, flagged as evidence of poor judgment. The most damning document was his incident log. October 12th, subject left stove unattended, potential fire hazard. October 28th, subject disoriented regarding current technology, possible confusion. November 3rd, subject expressed paranoia about neighbors, declining social awareness. I remembered that last one. I'd mentioned that the new couple upstairs played music too loud. Paranoia about neighbors. Every human moment, every ordinary frustration or forgetfulness, had been catalogued and distorted. My son had spent 6 months studying me not with love, but with the calculating eye of someone dismantling an obstacle. That night I finally cried, not from sadness but from rage. Pure, clarifying rage that burned through the shock and grief, and left something sharp-edged in its place. Marcus had built his trap carefully, methodically. But he'd made one critical miscalculation. He'd assumed I would never discover it until the cage door was already locked. On the 14th day of my trip, I picked up my phone and called my son. It was time to spring my own trap. "Mom." Marcus sounded genuinely delighted to hear my voice. "How's Florida? Is Deborah spoiling you rotten?" The ease of his deception took my breath away. His tone was warm, affectionate. The voice of a loving son checking on his traveling mother, not a man orchestrating her legal erasure. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need you to come to my apartment tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Silence stretched across the line. I could almost hear the gears turning, recalculating. "You're still in Florida," he said slowly. What are you talking about? No, sweetheart. I'm 6 blocks away. I've been here the entire time, watching everything. I paused, let the words sink in. I've seen it all, Marcus. The appraisers, the guardianship papers, every single visit. Every single lie. The silence that followed was absolute, suffocating. When he finally spoke, his voice had transformed, stripped of warmth, hardened into something defensive and cornered. Mom, listen, I can explain. 2 o'clock, I interrupted. Come alone, or I'm filing police reports for trespassing, fraud, and attempted exploitation of an elderly person. I've made copies of everything, Marcus. The petition, the incident logs, recordings of every visit. So please don't insult me by pretending this was concern. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. The next afternoon, I sat in my grandmother's chair, back in my own apartment, my own home, and waited. I'd restored everything to its proper place, erased all evidence of my surveillance except the hidden camera, still recording. At exactly 2 o'clock, I heard the key turn in my lock. Marcus entered looking haggard, pale beneath his expensive tan. His suit was rumpled, his hair uncombed, signs of a sleepless night that gave me no satisfaction. For just a moment, seeing him disheveled and frightened, I glimpsed the little boy he'd been, the child who'd crawled into my bed after nightmares about his father never coming home. My heart cracked, even now, even after everything. Sit down, I said quietly. He sat on the sofa, perched on its edge like he might need to flee. We stared at each other across my living room, across the chasm that had opened between us without my even noticing it widening. When did I become a problem to you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. When did I stop being your mother and become just an obstacle to eliminate? You're not, he stopped, dragged his hands through his hair. Mom, you don't understand. The firm is failing. Bad investments, lawsuits I can't discuss. I'm drowning in debt. I needed capital, You needed my home, I finished. My savings. My life insurance. You needed me gone so you could liquidate your childhood and save your business. The truth hung between us, ugly and undeniable. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Marcus said, his voice cracking. I was going to take care of you, make sure you had the best facility, the best care. By having me declared incompetent? I leaned forward, my hands gripping the armrests. By fabricating evidence of dementia? By turning my tea-making and charitable donations into symptoms of cognitive decline. He flinched at each accusation, but I saw something else flicker across his face. Calculation, the part of him still measuring angles, still searching for the argument that would salvage this. The facility at Meadowbrook is actually very nice, he said weakly. You would have been comfortable there. The absurdity of it hit me like a slap. He was still trying to sell me on my own imprisonment, still convinced he could talk his way through this if he found the right pitch. Stop, I said sharply. Just stop, Marcus. I don't want to hear about amenities or care levels. I want you to look at me and tell me the truth. When did you decide I was disposable? His composure finally shattered. His face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks. Whether from genuine remorse or fear of consequences, I couldn't tell anymore. Maybe he couldn't either. I'm sorry, he choked out. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I was desperate. I wasn't thinking clearly. The debts kept mounting and I panicked. I thought if I could just access the insurance money, sell the apartment, I could save everything I'd built. Everything I built, I corrected quietly. I gave you the seed money for that firm, Marcus. My late husband's life insurance, the savings I'd hoarded for decades. You built your empire on my sacrifice, and when it started crumbling, you decided to sacrifice me too. He had no answer for that. We sat in silence, the autumn light slanting through my windows, illuminating dust motes that danced between us like the fragments of our destroyed relationship. I worked 2 jobs to raise you, I continued, my voice steady now, emptied of anger, filled only with exhausted truth. I wore the same winter coat for 8 years because your textbooks came first. I loved you with an intensity that physically hurt sometimes, this sharp, beautiful ache right here. I pressed my hand to my chest. And you were going to erase me like an inconvenient line item in your budget. What are you going to do? He asked, and there it was, not, how can I make this right? But what are the consequences for me? I stood, walked to my desk, and retrieved an envelope I'd prepared. I've changed everything. New will, new power of attorney assigned to my lawyer, new beneficiaries for the insurance policy. You won't get this apartment, Marcus. You won't get anything except the knowledge that you destroyed the person who loved you most. I held out the envelope. Inside were copies of all his documents, All his lies, marked with a single word in red ink: denied. Now get out of my house.